Ever walked into a forest so silent that even your heartbeat sounds too loud? Tonight, we're sharing the 7 most disturbing true Washington state rainforest horror stories. These stories are based on real events, but names and sensitive details have been changed because some witnesses refuse to reveal the exact locations. They believe whatever they encountered is still out there. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? And if you love real disturbing horror stories, hit subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss the next nightmare. All right, dim the lights, put on your headphones, because the forest has a way of listening when someone talks about it. Let's begin with story number 1. I always thought national forests were peaceful. Places to breathe, escape life, reset mentally. 2 summers ago, I went solo hiking in Washington's Hoh Rain Forest. The kind of forest that looks prehistoric. Trees older than civilization, moss hanging like curtains. Air so wet it feels like breathing through cloth. I started my hike before sunrise. The light was weak, soft, almost shy behind the clouds. The trail was empty, or at least that's what I thought. I walked for about an hour before I noticed something strange. My footsteps had an echo. Not an accidental noise, not nature. An echo that matched my pace. Step, 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 step. Every time my boot pressed into the mud, I heard another behind me, slightly delayed, but perfectly mirroring my rhythm. As if someone was walking exactly 1 step behind me. I turned around. Nothing. Only fog. Moss. Silence. I laughed nervously. Probably water dripping. Or some stupid animal. But when I started walking again, a step. Step. And then, the steps sped up. Not running, just closing the distance. I stopped. The footsteps didn't. They kept going for 2 more steps. Step, step. As if whoever, whatever, was behind me didn't realize I had stopped walking. My spine went ice cold. That wasn't an animal. That was someone. I pushed myself to believe it was nothing. Forest acoustics can mess with your head. At least, that's what I kept repeating. But the air felt heavier now. Like the forest was suddenly paying attention to every breath I took. I slowed my pace, pretending to admire the trees, pretending I wasn't terrified. My boots sank into the soft earth with a wet sound. Then, there it was again, not footsteps this time, but breathing. A slow, damp exhale, like someone trying not to be heard. I spun around, scanning the tree line. The fog clung to the trunks like spider webs, refusing to let me see beyond a few feet. My chest tightened. I cleared my throat and called out, "Hello?" If someone's there, you're freaking me out. Silence. Not birds, not insects, nothing. A dead, suffocating silence. I took out my phone to check for a signal. No bars. No surprise. I kept walking, faster now, trying to convince myself I wasn't being followed. My heart pounded so hard that I could hear the pulsing in my ears. But then, to my left, a branch snapped. Loud, deliberate, too heavy to be a squirrel. I froze. Out of the corner of my eye, something shifted between the trees. A pale shape. Not walking, not running, just standing, watching. My legs turned weak, because I now knew with absolute certainty I wasn't alone. I forced myself to move again, but something inside me had already shifted. Every instinct screamed that I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, stiff and electric. I walked faster, but the forest seemed to tighten around me with every step. The trees leaned in, branches like crooked fingers reaching toward the trail. The silence became so absolute that it felt unnatural, like the whole forest was holding its breath with me. I tried to calm down by convincing myself it was another hiker, someone out early, maybe camping nearby. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. No normal person would lurk silently in the fog like that. I stopped again and crouched as if to retie my boot, trying to glance behind me without making it obvious. Through the veil of fog, I saw movement. Slow, deliberate. A shape slipped behind a massive cedar trunk. Not an animal. Too tall, too upright, too still. A cold wave crawled through my chest and down my arms. For the first time in my life, I understood what primal fear feels like. I swallowed hard. "I don't want any trouble," I said, louder than intended. The sound of my voice echoed strangely, like the trees swallowed part of it. Then, from somewhere deep in the fog, I heard a whisper. Not words, not language. Just a long, rasped exhale, almost like a sigh of disappointment. That's when I realized I was no longer hiking. I was being hunted. I picked up my pace, practically speed walking, my backpack bouncing against my shoulders. The fog thickened as if it sensed my fear and wanted to hide whatever was stalking me. My breathing became shallow. Every few seconds, I'd glance over my shoulder, expecting the pale figure to be right behind me. The trail began to narrow, forcing me into a single path. The mossy walls of vegetation seemed to close in, funneling me forward like a trap. After another minute, the footsteps returned, matching mine perfectly, like a delayed echo. I tried to trick it. I changed my rhythm suddenly, taking 2 fast steps. The sound behind me copied it flawlessly. My heart almost burst through my ribs. "Stop following me," I shouted into the fog, voice trembling more than I wanted. The forest absorbed my scream. No echo, no response. Just that crushing silence. Then, a voice broke it. Soft, raspy, right behind me. "Why are you running, Alex?" I froze so violently that my knees nearly buckled. My blood turned to ice. I never told anyone my plans. No social media posts. No one knew I was here alone. How did it know my name? I whipped around, expecting to see someone or something standing there. Instead, only the thick curtain of fog stared back at me. But there was something new in the air now, a thick, rotten smell, like wet soil mixed with decay. That was the moment the fear became something darker. It didn't just follow me. It knew me. I don't know what instinct took over. Survival, panic, desperation. But I bolted. My boots splashed through mud, slipping on wet roots and moss. I didn't care if I twisted an ankle or fell. I just wanted distance between me and that voice. My lungs burned as I ran, sucking in air that tasted like wet metal and rot. The forest around me blurred into streaks of green and gray. I could hear nothing but my breathing and the pounding of my heartbeat. Then, suddenly, all the sounds stopped again. No footsteps, no breathing, no voice. Only silence. I slowed to a walk, gasping, leaning against a tree to steady myself. My throat burned and my hands shook. I listened hard, trying to catch even the faintest sign of movement, but there was nothing. For a moment, I thought I had outrun whatever it was. That illusion shattered when the fog ahead of me moved. Not with wind, not naturally. It condensed, gathering into a single place, thickening like smoke being pulled by invisible strings. Slowly, the mist formed the outline of a body, tall, too tall, with limbs that seemed slightly wrong, elongated. As the fog peeled away, I saw pale skin stretched tightly across its frame, and hollow eyes like burned-out craters. It didn't walk toward me. It glided. The air around me dropped in temperature so fast I could see my breath. I stepped back, but my legs trembled, refusing to respond. The thing leaned forward just enough that I knew it was looking straight at me. And then, with a voice that sounded like wet leaves dragging across stone, it whispered, "You shouldn't have come alone." I stumbled backward, my boots slipping on the wet moss, but my eyes never left that thing. It didn't blink. It didn't tilt its head. It just watched me, as if waiting for something. For me to fail, for me to freeze, for me to surrender to fear. When I finally forced myself to move, it reacted instantly. The moment I turned, the forest exploded with sound. Branches snapped, leaves thrashed. Something massive lunged through the fog behind me. I sprinted blindly, half slipping, half falling as my backpack slammed against my spine. The trail twisted sharply, but I didn't stop to think. I only ran. The thing didn't step. It slid over the ground like it was weightless, the movement sickeningly smooth. Every few seconds, I heard it whisper my name from somewhere in the fog ahead of me, as if it was everywhere at once. "Alex." I kept running, lungs on fire, until I spotted a fallen log ahead. I vaulted over it, barely clearing the trunk, and ducked behind a cluster of ferns. I pressed a trembling hand over my mouth to quiet my breathing. The forest went dead silent again. Then, directly in front of me, inches beyond the ferns, something leaned down, close enough that I heard it inhale my scent. I held perfectly still, every muscle locked in place. The creature hovered inches from the ferns I hid behind. I could see its hand now. Long fingers ending in tapered points, not nails, but something harder, almost translucent. It brushed the plants lightly, and wherever it touched, droplets of condensation formed, as if the very air froze around it. Eventually, it drifted past me, gliding further down the trail. I waited until I couldn't hear its movements, then crawled out from behind the ferns and sprinted in the opposite direction. I ran until my legs shook and my chest burned. When I finally slowed down, trying to catch my breath, I looked around and froze. The trail was gone. The dirt path I'd been following all morning had vanished beneath the moss, swallowed by undergrowth. Only thick vegetation surrounded me. No markers, no footing, no route out. My heart hammered against my ribs. I spun in circles, panic tightening my throat. This forest wasn't confused. It was changing around me. A low whisper curled through the air, faint and mocking, as if carried by the moss itself. "You can't leave." I forced myself to keep moving, pushing through branches that scraped my arms and face. The forest felt alive now, shifting, breathing, watching. Every time I tried to follow what looked like an opening, moss and vines slid down like curtains, sealing it off. I checked my compass. The needle spun wildly, twitching like it was being pulled in different directions. I tried my phone again. No signal, no GPS. Just a black screen glitching white for a split second, like static. I spotted a stream cutting through the brush and felt a surge of relief. Water always leads somewhere. To a trail, a road, anything. I followed it for several minutes, stepping on slick rocks and roots. The water's steady noise gave me hope. Then I noticed something that froze me mid-step. The stream was flowing uphill. I blinked, convinced my eyes were lying. But no. The water trickled against gravity, crawling upward like it was being pulled. My stomach twisted. The forest wasn't just disorienting me. It was rearranging itself. Behind me, branches snapped, loud and close. The whisper came again, this time right against my ear. Almost. I spun around, and the fog swallowed everything. My breathing turned ragged as I backed away from the impossible stream. I felt the fog closing around me, thick like wet cloth pressed over my face. My vision blurred, my head spinning as if the forest sucked the oxygen out of the air. I stumbled into a small clearing, and the world suddenly fell silent. No wind, no water, no movement. Just a stillness that felt wrong. Then it emerged from the fog. Not walking, not drifting, appearing. One moment fog, the next a figure. Its face was much clearer now. Stretched skin pulled tight over sharp bone structure, as if carved from pale wax. Its eyes were deep, black voids. Inside them, no emotion, no humanity, just hunger. Its neck tilted in a slow, unnatural angle, as if studying me the way a scientist might observe a trapped insect. I tried to speak, but my voice failed. The creature leaned closer, so close I could feel the cold radiating from its skin. Its mouth opened slowly, revealing nothing inside. No tongue, no teeth, just an endless darkness. "You were chosen." The words didn't come from its mouth. They came from inside my head. I don't know how I found the strength, but I ran. I tore through the undergrowth blindly, branches lashing my arms and face, roots trying to trip me at every step. The creature didn't chase me in the normal sense. It glided, following me like a shadow in multiple places at once. Its whispers echoed in my skull, repeating my name, taunting me, chilling me to my core. Every time I tripped or slowed, I could feel its presence closing in, cold and inescapable. After what felt like hours, I stumbled onto an abandoned logging road. Sunlight filtered through the fog, but it did little to ease my panic. The road led to a ranger station, where I finally found a hiker who called 911. When I tried to explain what I'd seen, my voice cracked, and words failed me. Nobody believed me, of course. Since that day, I've avoided Washington forests entirely. But sometimes, in dreams or in foggy weather, I feel it near. I hear the whispers, and I remember the way it knew my name. I've come to call it the Fog Walker. It doesn't hunt for sport. It hunts because it remembers. And as long as the rain falls over those ancient trees, I know it waits. Somewhere. I had been driving along a winding forest road in western Washington, chasing a long weekend escape from the city. Rain was falling lightly, the kind that turns the forest green and dark at the same time. My GPS had stopped working hours ago, and cell signal was non-existent, but I didn't mind. That's when I spotted it, a small, isolated cabin, partially hidden behind thick fog and towering evergreens. The cabin looked abandoned, worn by years of rain and rot. But the chimney had a faint wisp of smoke curling upward. I pulled over, curiosity outweighing caution. As I approached, the scent of wet pine mixed with something else, earthy but sour like decaying leaves. The door creaked when I pushed it open, revealing a dusty interior, furniture draped in cobwebs, and a fireplace that still had faint ashes. It should have been deserted. Yet I felt a chill crawl up my spine, as if someone, or something, was watching from the shadows. Ignoring the warning, I stepped inside, trying to convince myself it was just the isolation getting to me. Rain pounded against the roof, creating a rhythm almost like a heartbeat. And then, from somewhere above, I heard it. A soft, deliberate footstep on the attic ladder. I froze, my heart hammered as I stood frozen, staring at the ladder leading to the attic. The footsteps repeated, slow, measured, deliberate, and yet no one was visible. I told myself it had to be an animal, maybe a raccoon or a stray forest creature, but the sound was too precise, too human. My stomach tightened with dread as I took a cautious step toward the ladder. The air inside the cabin felt heavier now, damp and cold, like the fog outside had seeped through the walls. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but something, morbid curiosity perhaps, kept me rooted. I climbed the first few rungs, each one creaking under my weight. The footsteps stopped immediately. Silence. My ears strained, picking up only the rain against the roof and the faint rustle of leaves outside. I reached the top, expecting to see an empty attic. But there it was, a shadow at the far end, slightly hunched, impossibly still. Its eyes reflected the dim light from the single cracked window, glowing faintly. I felt a primal fear pierce me. It wasn't moving, yet it felt alive, studying me, waiting. I froze, realizing I had stumbled into a place that wasn't just abandoned. It was occupied by something that should not exist. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to move. The shadow didn't blink. It didn't twitch. It simply watched, and the weight of its gaze pressed down on me like a physical force. My chest tightened. I could barely draw a breath. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a reflection, anything to rationalize what I was seeing. But deep down, I knew better. The figure began to shift, almost imperceptibly, gliding closer. Its movements were unnatural, silent, like a predator stalking prey in slow motion. I could make out elongated limbs, pale and thin, stretching slightly too far for a human frame. Its eyes, hollow, black and unyielding, locked on mine, and I felt something inside me shiver uncontrollably. I stumbled backward, hitting the attic ladder, my hand scraping against the rough wood. The shadow tilted its head, and I could swear it smiled. A slow, crooked motion that sent a cold pulse straight through my spine. Then a whisper echoed in the confined space, soft but clear, as though the cabin itself had gained a voice. "You shouldn't be here." Rain outside seemed louder now, almost deafening, masking the sound of my own heartbeat. I knew I had to escape, but every instinct screamed that leaving wouldn't be easy. Something had claimed this place, and it wasn't about to let me go. I scrambled down the attic ladder, hands shaking, heart hammering so violently I feared it might burst. Every step I took sounded deafening, yet I could still feel its gaze following me, like invisible eyes pressing into my back. The cabin seemed to stretch unnaturally, the walls narrowing as I reached the main floor. It wasn't just the shadow I feared now. It was the cabin itself, as if the structure had taken life, conspiring to trap me. I reached the door, yanking it open, expecting the foggy forest outside. But the porch was gone. In its place, thick mist curled and twisted around trees that weren't where they had been when I first arrived. My stomach churned. The rain had stopped, replaced by an unnatural silence so heavy it made my ears ring. I could barely see a few feet ahead, and every sound I thought I heard, a twig snapping, a faint footstep, could have been the shadow closing in. Panic surged. I backed away, searching for another exit. That's when I noticed faint markings on the cabin floor, lines scratched into the wood, symbols or words. I couldn't tell. And from the corner of my eye, I glimpsed movement, not the figure yet, but something crawling along the walls, impossibly fast. I realized then that the cabin wasn't abandoned. It had been waiting. I forced myself to move deeper into the cabin, my hands brushing against wet, rotting walls for guidance. Every instinct screamed to leave, but the front exit was swallowed by fog, the back door blocked by a fallen beam I hadn't noticed before. I was trapped. The cabin seemed alive, each creak of the floorboards and whisper of wind echoing like a mocking laugh. Then I heard it, a whisper, barely audible but unmistakable. "Don't run. Stay with us." It wasn't outside. It wasn't above or below. It came from everywhere, vibrating through the walls, the floor, even the air I breathed. My stomach turned as the voice repeated, overlapping itself, faster this time, impossible to localize. I backed toward a corner, trying to ground myself, but the temperature dropped sharply. Frost formed on the floorboards beneath my boots. My breath came out in ragged clouds, and my hands shook violently. The shadow emerged from the mist inside the cabin itself. It didn't walk. It glided, sliding along the floor, walls, and ceiling, an impossible form that twisted subtly with every movement. Its eyes bore into mine, hollow, endless voids that seemed to stretch into my mind. The whispering stopped abruptly, replaced by a suffocating silence that felt alive. I realized, with a sick certainty, that the cabin had claimed me as its prey. Panic overtook me. I bolted toward what I thought was an exit, but the cabin's interior seemed to twist unnaturally. Hallways stretching impossibly long, doors opening to walls, corners folding back on themselves. The shadow followed, gliding silently, always just beyond the edge of my vision. Every step I took echoed unnaturally, as if the cabin itself was amplifying my fear. I turned sharply, hoping to find another way out, and collided with a table. The impact sent shards of wood and glass flying. My hands were bleeding, but I didn't care. I needed to escape. As I scrambled past the debris, I caught a glimpse of it. The figure moving effortlessly, twisting its form around the warped hallway, always keeping pace without making a sound. The temperature dropped even further. My breath fogged before me, and my heartbeat thundered in my ears. I realized it wasn't chasing me in a normal sense. The cabin was the predator, and the shadow was its extension. It was guiding me, corralling me into the center, into its lair. A whisper slithered around my skull. There's no way out. Not yet. I realized then that the forest beyond the cabin was irrelevant. The danger was here, inside, inescapable. I stumbled into a small room at the center of the cabin, slamming the door behind me. The walls were lined with shelves, each covered in dust and strange, unreadable symbols etched into the wood. The room smelled of damp earth and something far fouler, decay, like something had been trapped and left to rot here for years. I pressed myself against the far wall, trying to calm my racing heart. Every instinct screamed that I was about to die. Then I heard it. A faint scrape against the other side of the door. Not a knock, not a scratch. Something dragging along the wood. I forced myself to look through a crack in the door. The shadow was there. It wasn't moving toward me. It was waiting. Its hollow eyes seemed to peer straight through the door, into me, reading my fear. A cold realization hit me. The cabin didn't need to chase me. It had trapped me. Every hallway, every corner, every door led me inward, toward this place, toward it. I was the prey, and the shadow was merely the face of something far older, far more patient. I pressed my back harder against the wall. The whisper slithered through the cracks. "You can't hide." I couldn't stay there any longer. Clutching a broken chair as a makeshift weapon, I edged toward a narrow window. Outside, the forest was swallowed in fog, but I didn't care. I needed light, movement, anything. The shadow didn't follow me through the door, but I felt it everywhere. Lingering in corners, pressing down through the floorboards, whispering inside my skull. As I peered through the grimy glass, I saw it. A shape in the fog, hovering unnaturally close to the cabin. It wasn't walking. It drifted, floating above the wet earth like smoke given form. I could make out elongated limbs, pale and twisting, and those hollow eyes glinting faintly, unblinking, eternal. Suddenly, the fog seemed to seep inside the cabin itself, swirling along the floor and walls, thick and choking. I stumbled back, gagging. The whisper returned, this time louder, harsher. "You can't leave. Yet." I realized then that escaping wouldn't be a matter of running. The cabin had become part of the forest, part of the mist, part of the shadow itself. Every path I thought I saw outside could vanish in a heartbeat. And I understood, with sick certainty, that the creature was waiting for me to make a mistake. I had no choice. The cabin's door was blocked, the windows were useless, and the shadow outside waited like a predator. I yanked open the back door, throwing myself into the foggy forest. Rain had returned, but heavier now, pounding my back and blinding me with sheets of cold water. Every step sank into mud. Every tree seemed to loom closer, twisting unnaturally. Then I saw it. Not far ahead, just at the edge of visibility, the pale figure emerged from the fog. Its form stretched impossibly, limbs bending in ways no human should move. It hovered just above the wet ground, and those hollow black eyes were fixed on me. I tried to run faster, but my boots slipped on slick roots. The whisper returned, now a chorus inside my head. "You can't escape. You belong here." Desperation took over. I dove behind a massive cedar, heart hammering, lungs burning. The shadow paused, almost tilting its head, as if amused. Then, with a motion faster than I could track, it vanished. Or perhaps it never moved at all, and I had simply been blinded by the fog. I was alone, at least for now. But I knew the cabin and the shadow weren't finished. I ran blindly through the mud and fog, branches lashing my face and arms. Every instinct screamed at me to never stop. The rain poured harder, and the forest seemed endless. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that the cabin and its shadow were still with me, a presence pressing at the edges of reality. Hours later, or maybe minutes, time had lost meaning. I stumbled onto a logging road. Faint headlights appeared in the distance. I flagged down a trucker who stared at me like I was insane. I tried to explain what had happened, but words failed. How could I describe a shape that wasn't entirely of this world? A cabin that twisted space and time around it? Since that night, I've avoided the Washington forests entirely. Yet sometimes, when fog rolls in and rain falls, I feel it again. The watching, the whispers, the pull of that cabin. I've come to call the figure the Mist Walker. It doesn't just haunt the forest. It waits for anyone foolish enough to step too close. And I know, deep down, the cabin still exists, patient and hungry, ready for the next wanderer. I had been hiking in the Olympic National Forest for years, but that day felt different. The rain fell heavier than usual, and the fog lay thick across the moss-covered trees. My goal was simple: reach an old lookout point and photograph the forest from above. But as I ventured deeper, the familiar trails seemed to vanish beneath a curtain of mist. The GPS on my phone flickered and died, and my map offered no guidance. The forest was alive, damp and silent, yet heavy with a sense that something unseen was watching me. I tried to shake off the unease, focusing on the sound of raindrops hitting the canopy. But then I noticed it. A set of footprints in the mud, fresh, leading off the trail and disappearing into the fog. They were larger than mine, humanoid, but oddly elongated. and the spacing was inconsistent, like the creature that made them had no concern for rhythm or gravity. My curiosity got the better of me, despite every instinct screaming to turn back. I followed the tracks, my boots sinking into the wet earth. The forest grew darker, the fog denser, and the silence more oppressive. Somewhere ahead, a twig snapped sharply, not under my weight, but under something else. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared into the fog, trying to locate the source of the snap. The footprints continued, leading me further into the forest, deeper than I had ever ventured. Every step I took seemed muffled by the thick moss, yet I could feel a presence moving just beyond my vision, brushing against the edges of my awareness. I told myself it was an animal, a deer, maybe, or a bear. But something in the rhythm of the movement didn't match any creature I knew. The footprints ahead shifted slightly, almost as if whatever made them was aware of me following. I strained my eyes, scanning the mist, but all I could see was the rolling gray fog and the silhouettes of ancient trees. Then I heard it, a low exhale, almost human, but wet and guttural, like it had been underwater too long. It came from all directions, echoing through the trunks. My stomach twisted with fear, but I couldn't turn back. Something compelled me forward. Curiosity, maybe, or the need to survive by understanding what I had stumbled into. I pressed on, boots slipping in the mud. And that's when I felt it. A cold, heavy gaze on my back. Though nothing was there, I froze mid-step, my breath visible in ragged clouds despite the warm rain. The feeling of eyes on me intensified, a weight pressing from behind, heavy and cold. I spun slowly, but the fog swallowed everything. Trees loomed like silent giants, their moss-draped branches twisting unnaturally. I told myself to keep moving, to ignore the sensation, but every step forward made my skin crawl. Suddenly, a shadow flitted between two trees. I stopped dead, staring, heart hammering. It wasn't human. Its limbs were elongated, almost unnaturally so, moving with a grace that no human could manage. It paused, then vanished into the mist before I could focus my eyes. I felt it watching, tracking me, calculating my every movement. I stumbled backward, mud sucking at my boots, and tried calling out, but my voice was swallowed by the fog. The sound of twigs snapping echoed around me, not from the direction I had seen the shadow, but all around, like it was everywhere at once. Panic surged. I realized I wasn't following the trail anymore. The footprints had stopped, yet the presence remained. I had walked into something far older than myself, something that didn't want to be seen, and yet it wanted me. I forced myself to move again, shoving through the dripping branches and tangled roots. Every step seemed to echo too loudly, bouncing back from the fog like it had a life of its own. The forest had grown darker, the mist thickening until I could barely see 10 feet ahead. Then I heard it, soft, almost imperceptible, like a hiss carried on the wet air. "You shouldn't be here." I froze, my boots sinking into the mud. The voice wasn't coming from any one direction. It surrounded me, vibrating through the fog, through the trees, through the earth beneath me. My skin crawled as I realized it wasn't just a sound. It was an intelligence, aware of my presence, reacting to my fear. I tried to call out, but no words formed. The mist swirled unnaturally, and in a brief clearing, I glimpsed it. The shadow again. Its elongated form moved with impossible grace, gliding just above the ground, black hollow eyes locking on mine. For a second, the fog parted enough to reveal a twisted grin, a face that shouldn't exist in our world. I stumbled back, heart racing, and tripped over a root. When I looked up, it was closer. I realized with a cold certainty, it had been following me the entire time, waiting for me to falter. Fear clawed at me as I scrambled backward, trying to put distance between myself and the figure. But the fog seemed alive, twisting and folding around me, funneling me forward like some cruel trap. My boots sank into the mud with every step, making me painfully slow. I could feel its presence drawing closer, though I couldn't see it clearly through the dense mist. Then I felt it, a brush against my shoulder, ice cold like wet stone, leaving a shock of fear coursing through my body. I spun around, but there was nothing immediately visible, only the thick, white fog swirling as though disturbed by an invisible hand. My heart pounded, every instinct screaming that I was in immediate danger. The whispers returned, louder now, overlapping and surrounding me. "Don't run. You belong here." My chest tightened as I realized it wasn't just following. It was studying me, toying with me. In that moment, I noticed something horrifying. Footprints in the mud appeared behind me, but they weren't mine. They were massive, elongated, stretching farther than a human step should reach. And they moved in ways no normal creature could. I stumbled, my mind racing, trapped between disbelief and primal terror. I understood then that escaping this forest and this thing would not be simple. Panic surged through me. I bolted blindly, boots slipping in the mud, branches lashing my face and arms. The fog wrapped around me, making every direction seem the same. I could hear something moving behind me. Not running, not walking, but gliding, smooth and silent, keeping pace with me effortlessly. The whispers had become a chorus, echoing inside my skull. "You cannot escape. You belong here." I tried to find higher ground, a ridge or clearing, anything to get a sense of direction. The forest refused. Trees twisted impossibly in the fog, roots tripping me at every step. Every instinct screamed to stop, but I knew I couldn't. I could feel it behind me, cold and patient, watching, waiting for me to falter. Suddenly, the fog thickened even more, curling around my legs like grasping fingers. The whispers paused. Silence. My chest heaved, every nerve on edge. Then, from directly above, I felt it, a presence so close it pressed on my shoulders and head, heavy and cold, almost tangible. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it, and I knew without doubt that I was being hunted. I realized the forest wasn't just dangerous. It was alive, and it wanted me. I stumbled into a small clearing, heart hammering, lungs burning, mud clinging to my boots. For the first time, I glimpsed it fully through the fog. The shadow wasn't entirely human, yet it mimicked form in horrifying detail. Its limbs were too long, joints bending in impossible directions. Its pale skin seemed to shimmer faintly in the mist. And those hollow black eyes stared straight at me, unblinking and infinite. It didn't move in a way I could understand. One moment, it was on the far side of the clearing. The next, closer, gliding with unnatural speed, soundless, stalking me with patience I could feel like a physical weight. The whispers returned, urgent now, almost screaming inside my head. "Stop running. It's futile." I froze, trying to keep my footing in the mud. My hands shook, my breath ragged. And then, just as quickly, it stopped. The clearing was silent, except for my own panicked breathing. But I could feel it, the heavy presence behind me, leaning into my fear. I understood then. It wasn't hunting for sport. It was toying with me, testing me, teaching me something I didn't want to know. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the forest itself seemed to close in, leaving no escape. Panic took over completely. I turned and sprinted blindly through the mud and fog, branches slapping my face and arms, roots threatening to trip me at every step. The shadow followed silently, effortlessly, always just behind, keeping pace no matter how fast I ran. Its hollow black eyes that seemed to burn into my mind, freezing me in terror even as my legs carried me forward. The forest had become a labyrinth. Every tree looked the same, every path disappearing into dense mist. I realized that running was futile. The fog twisted reality, bending space around the creature. The whispers returned, overlapping, a cacophony of warning and mockery. You cannot leave. It's already inside you. I stumbled into a shallow stream, the icy water soaking me, but I didn't care. I had to keep moving. And then I saw a flicker of light in the distance, faint, almost imperceptible. My mind clung to it like a lifeline, my only hope of survival. I risked looking back. The shadow had stopped momentarily, hovering, stretching impossibly high, tilting its head as though observing me. Then it vanished into the mist. Silence fell, heavy and unnatural. But I knew it wasn't gone. It never truly leaves. I ran toward the light, lungs burning, heart pounding. Survival was the only option. I burst out of the forest onto a narrow logging road, mud caked to my boots and rain dripping from my hair. The faint light ahead was from a lone truck parked at the edge of the trees. Relief surged through me, though my legs barely had strength to keep moving. I waved frantically, shouting, hoping someone would notice my desperate state. But as I neared the vehicle, I sensed it. The presence. The shadow hadn't followed in a normal sense. It lingered, watching from the edge of the fog where the trees met the road. The whispers were gone, replaced by a suffocating silence that pressed on my chest. I stumbled into the truck bed, shivering and soaked, the driver staring at me like I had seen a ghost. I tried to explain, but the words sounded absurd, even to me. Finally, I forced myself to look back. The fog parted slightly, and there it was, the elongated figure, pale and impossibly still, hovering at the tree line. Its hollow eyes bore into me one last time. Then it vanished into the mist, leaving only silence and the faint sound of dripping rain. I knew the forest hadn't let me go. It had simply released me for now. The trucker didn't speak, only nodded as I collapsed onto the seat, shaking and drenched. I tried to explain, but my voice caught in my throat. How could I describe the forest, the mist, the elongated figure that had stalked me through the rain and fog? The shadow, the whispers, the unnatural movement. It defied everything I knew. We drove in silence for miles. Every turn, every bend in the road, my mind kept flashing back to the fog, to the hollow eyes that had never blinked, to the voice that had whispered my doom. Even as the forest disappeared behind us, I felt the presence lingering in the corners of my vision, as if it had followed me out. I've never returned to that part of the Olympic National Forest. Friends and fellow hikers warned me it's dangerous, but they couldn't understand, not really. I've come to call the figure the Mist Stalker. It doesn't just haunt the forest. It waits in the fog, in the rain, in shadows, patient and eternal, claiming those who wander too far. And sometimes, on foggy nights back in town, I swear I feel it watching, waiting for me to forget, ready to lead me back into the forest. I had planned the weekend camping trip for months. My friends and I wanted to escape the city, set up tents deep in the Washington rainforest, and disconnect from everything. We found a small clearing near a stream, surrounded by towering fir trees shrouded in fog. The air was damp, filled with the scent of moss and wet earth. At first, it was perfect. The sound of rain dripping from the canopy, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. As night fell, the forest changed. The fog thickened, curling around the tents like fingers. Shadows shifted where there shouldn't have been any. We joked nervously about the eerie feeling, attributing it to exhaustion or imagination. But I noticed something odd. Footprints leading from our campsite into the trees. They weren't ours. Too large, too spaced out, and strangely distorted, like someone, or something, had walked on its tiptoes for some steps, then flat-footed the next. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was a hiker or a ranger, but the forest seemed to close in, quieting every natural sound. The stream no longer babbled. The wind had stilled. A heavy, unnatural silence settled over the clearing, and then one of my friends vanished. A panic surged through us as we realized our friend was gone. One moment, he had been laughing by the fire. The next, he had simply vanished. We shouted his name, our voices swallowed by the fogs and the oppressive silence of the forest. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, that the forest itself had shifted around us, hiding him from sight. We split up briefly, calling out, moving cautiously through the damp underbrush. The fog clung to our clothes and hair, reducing visibility to barely a few feet. The trail that had led into the trees was gone, replaced by tangled roots and thick moss. No footprints, no signs of struggle. Nothing to indicate where he had gone. Then I heard it. A low, guttural sound, like a breath exhaled through stone, coming from deeper in the forest. My heart sank. It wasn't human. The sound seemed to reverberate through the trees, vibrating in the ground beneath my boots. The others froze as I pointed toward the direction it came from. The fog swirled unnaturally, and I thought I saw a pale shape moving between the trees, almost gliding, its limbs elongated and unnatural. We realized, with a cold, creeping dread, that we weren't alone. Something was here, something patient, intelligent and hunting. We regrouped, hearts racing, eyes darting through the thick fog. The forest had fallen eerily silent again, yet a strange whispering seemed to drift through the mist, unintelligible but undeniably present. It was as if the fog itself had a voice, murmuring in a language older than humans, pressing against the edges of our minds. Every rustle of a branch, every shifting shadow made us jump, imagining the pale figure moving just beyond sight. One of my friends swore he saw movement near the stream, a shape elongated and pale, blending with the mist. When we turned to look again, it was gone, leaving only silence and a cold unease. The footprints that had appeared earlier now seemed closer to the campsite, circling in ways that defied logic, as though the thing was studying us. We tried to rationalize, blaming exhaustion, the fog, and paranoia. But the forest didn't cooperate. The whispering grew louder when we huddled together, and the fog thickened, almost tangible, curling around our legs like hands. It was then that we realized the truth. Whatever was here, it wasn't just stalking one of us. It had marked all of us. And the longer we stayed, the closer it moved, unseen yet ever present, feeding on our fear. The fog thickened, pressing against us as we stumbled toward the tents, every step heavy with dread. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the mist, pale, elongated, moving with unnatural grace. Its hollow eyes locked onto ours, unblinking and eternal, and a low, guttural whisper filled my mind. "You cannot leave." One of my friends screamed and bolted toward the tents, but the fog seemed to twist around him. He vanished almost instantly, leaving only his terrified echo behind. My stomach churned as I realized it wasn't just stalking us. It was controlling the space around us, shaping the forest to trap us. I tried to call the others, but the words caught in my throat. The shadow glided closer, limbs bending in impossible directions, and I felt a cold pressure, like icy fingers brushing my skin. My heart hammered, my mind screaming to run, but my feet felt rooted to the mud. The remaining friends huddled together, trembling, and I could see in their eyes that they understood. This thing wasn't human, wasn't alive in any way we could comprehend. It existed to hunt, to terrify, and it had marked us. And the forest, the fog itself, had become its ally. We had no choice but to flee, even if the forest had already decided we would not escape. We fled blindly into the dense forest, mud sucking at our boots, branches slapping our faces. The fog closed in around us, twisting the familiar trees into alien shapes. Every step felt like wading through water, the cold rain soaking us to the bone. The whispers followed, unintelligible but urgent, pressing against our minds like the forest itself was alive and aware of our fear. We tried to stick together, but panic fractured our group. One friend slipped on a mossy root and screamed as the fog swallowed him. We turned back, but there was nothing. No footprints, no movement, no sign that he had ever been there. The forest had taken him. The elongated figure reappeared just beyond a thicket, hovering effortlessly above the wet ground. Its hollow black eyes glinted in the dim light, studying us. I could feel the cold pressure of its presence, a weight that seemed to crush the very air. Desperation took over. We ran faster, hoping to find a way out, a road, a trail, anything. But the fog twisted around us, disorienting us, turning every direction into the same nightmarish maze. It wasn't just hunting us. The forest, the mist, the shadow, they were one. And it wanted all of us. The forest seemed endless, each step deeper than the last. Rain soaked us, mud clinging to our clothes. Yet the shadow never faltered, never slowed. Its hollow eyes glimmered faintly through the thick fog, watching, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment. Every branch snapping beneath our feet echoed like a warning. Suddenly, it moved faster. One of my friends, lagging behind, screamed as a pale, elongated limb shot out from the mist, brushing him violently. He stumbled, yelping, disappearing into the white haze. My heart froze. The figure didn't chase in a normal sense. It toyed with us, bending the fog around itself, appearing and vanishing, controlling what we could see and hear. I tried to rally the remaining friends, shouting for them to keep moving. But the forest had grown chaotic. Trees warped in the fog, shadows danced where there should be none, and the whispers returned, urgent, almost alive. "You cannot leave. You are ours." Panic gripped me. We had no idea where the edge of the forest was, where safety might lie. The shadow loomed closer, now almost tangible, a presence that pressed on my mind and chest simultaneously. It was patient, calculated, and relentless. We were running not just from a creature, but from the forest itself, a trap that wanted us all. We stumbled into a narrow ravine, the fog swirling thicker than ever. Every step felt like we were sinking, the mud gripping our boots as if the forest itself were trying to hold us. My chest burned, lungs screaming for air, but the shadow never wavered, never blinked, gliding effortlessly behind us, its elongated limbs bending in impossible ways. One friend tripped and fell, and I reached for him. But before my hand could touch his, a cold pressure slammed into him, lifting him slightly off the ground. His scream echoed through the mist and then abruptly cut off. My stomach twisted. The forest had claimed him without leaving a trace. I turned and ran, slipping on wet roots, branches whipping my face. The shadow appeared ahead for a brief moment, tilting its head, watching, almost amused. Then it disappeared, leaving only the fog and the cold, oppressive silence that followed every one of its movements. We pressed on, desperate for any sign of safety. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet the forest offered no path, no clarity. The whispers returned, overlapping in a dissonant chorus, echoing inside my skull. You cannot escape. We are always here. By now it was clear. Survival would not be enough. The forest and the shadow were relentless, and they had chosen us. The fog thickened to an almost tangible wall as we pushed forward, our movements frantic, hearts hammering. Every sense screamed danger. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. The elongated figure appeared again, gliding effortlessly above the forest floor, its hollow eyes boring into us, unblinking, eternal. The whispers grew louder, overlapping in a deafening chorus that clawed at my mind. You cannot leave. You belong to us. Branches whipped my face, roots grabbed at my boots, but I forced myself to run. Behind us, the shadow moved with impossible speed, appearing closer with every step, yet always maintaining an eerie, supernatural distance. Its limbs bent and stretched in ways that defied physics, and its pale, shimmering skin reflected the dim light through the mist. I could see the edge of the clearing ahead, the road that might lead us to safety. Adrenaline surged. I screamed for my friends, urging them to run faster, to keep moving. The shadow's presence pressed against me, cold and suffocating. But I refused to look back. For a moment, I dared to believe we might escape. But the forest itself seemed to shift behind us, closing the paths we had come through, guiding us toward an unknown fate. Finally, the fog thinned slightly, revealing the faint outline of the logging road we had been searching for. My legs burned, lungs heaving, but hope surged. For a moment, I believed we might actually make it out. The forest seemed to recoil, the trees stretching and swaying as if protesting our escape. But the shadow wasn't finished. For an instant, it appeared at the edge of the clearing, hovering just beyond the tree line. Pale and elongated, limbs bending unnaturally, hollow black eyes locked on us. A shiver ran down my spine as the whispers returned, soft but insistent. You cannot leave. We are always here. We ran onto the road, mud slapping our boots, rain dripping from our hair, hearts hammering in unison. The remaining friends stayed close, breathing heavily, eyes darting back toward the misted forest. Every instinct screamed that the creature was still watching, still waiting. As we reached the faint lights of a passing truck, relief washed over us. Temporary, fragile. The shadow did not follow onto the road, but its presence lingered, heavy in the fog, like a warning. The forest had released us for now, but it hadn't let go. Even as we drove away, I felt its gaze, a cold weight pressing against the back of my mind. We finally reached the main road, drenched, trembling, and utterly exhausted. The passing truck slowed as we waved frantically, its headlights cutting through the fog. Relief surged, but it was fragile. Even as we climbed into the vehicle, the forest behind us seemed alive, swallowing the fog and hiding the shadow that had hunted us relentlessly. The driver looked at us with wide, uneasy eyes, but said nothing. We tried to explain the fog, the whispers, the elongated pale figure, but words felt inadequate, absurd even. The lingering terror was too vast to capture in language. I stared at the tree line as the truck drove away, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a black silhouette, watching us, waiting. I've come to call it the fog stalker. It does not merely haunt the forest, it inhabits it. It studies, toys, and chooses its victims carefully. Those who wander too deep may vanish, their screams swallowed by the mist. Even now, nights later, the memory returns. In foggy weather, I feel it pressing against my mind, watching from shadows. The Washington rainforest is more than a wilderness. It is a place of patience, of unseen hunters. And the fog stalker waits, eternal and patient, for the next unwary traveler. I had always been drawn to the old ranger stations in Washington state. On this trip, I decided to explore one deep in the rainforest, a place long abandoned, rumored to have been deserted after mysterious disappearances decades ago. The hike there was brutal. Thick mud swallowed my boots, and the dense canopy blocked most of the daylight. The air was damp, rich with moss and decay, the smell of wet earth overpowering. Finally, through the mist, I spotted it. A weathered wooden structure, leaning slightly, windows dark and broken, roof sagging under years of neglect. The silence around it was deafening. No birds, no insects, nothing but the distant hum of the forest and the occasional drip of water from the trees. I hesitated at the threshold, feeling an unshakable sense of being watched. I stepped inside. The air was cold, stale, and carried a faint metallic scent. Broken furniture and rotting papers littered the floor, and the walls were streaked with water damage. Something about the place felt alive in a way I couldn't explain, as if it had memories, secrets it wanted to keep hidden. Then I heard it, a faint, deliberate knock from the upper floor. My pulse quickened. I wasn't alone. I wasn't. My heart pounded as I ascended the creaking staircase, each step groaning under my weight. The upper floor was darker, the fog outside seeping through broken windows, casting ghostly shadows across the room. Dust motes floated in the dim light, disturbed by my movement. Every instinct screamed that I should leave, but curiosity or foolishness drove me forward. Then I saw it. Footprints in the dust. They weren't mine. Large, elongated, and oddly spaced, stretching toward a door at the far end of the hallway. I swallowed hard, trying to rationalize it. Perhaps a previous explorer or animals. But the spacing was too precise, too deliberate. As I reached the door, I heard it. Soft scraping sounds from inside, almost like fingernails on wood. The knocking from earlier echoed again, this time from multiple points, overlapping, disorienting. My pulse raced as I slowly pushed the door open. Inside, the room was empty, or so it seemed. Shadows moved in impossible directions, folding against walls and ceiling. The metallic scent intensified, and I felt a cold presence brush my shoulder. I spun around, heart hammering, but nothing was there, except the footprints, now continuing toward the shattered window, as if inviting me to follow them into the fog outside. I stepped toward the window, every nerve screaming, mud from the hike still clinging to my boots. The footprints stopped at the broken glass, but a movement in the corner of the room caught my eye. A pale, elongated shadow shifted against the wall, limbs bending at impossible angles. My breath caught. It wasn't human, yet it moved with uncanny intelligence, watching, waiting. The knocking started again, louder, echoing in all directions at once. My ears rang, and a chill ran through my body. The metallic scent in the air grew stronger, stinging my nose. I backed away, stumbling over broken furniture, and the shadow followed, gliding silently, defying gravity, its hollow black eyes never leaving me. I tried to scream, but the sound was caught in my throat. It tilted its head slowly, as if studying my fear. Every instinct told me to flee. Yet I felt rooted in place, paralyzed by the presence pressing against my mind. Then the fog outside the window swirled unnaturally, and I saw it move, stretching impossibly, emerging from the mist like an extension of the forest itself. The ranger station wasn't just abandoned, it was alive, and the entity was its guardian. I realized with terror that leaving the building would not mean escaping the horror. Panic surged through me. I wanted to run, but the floorboards groaned under my feet, and the shadow moved with impossible speed, cutting off any path to the stairs. The fog outside thickened, curling through the broken windows like icy fingers. I realized the entity wasn't confined to the station. It controlled the space around it, bending the fogs and shadows to trap me. I tried to find another exit, my hands brushing against rotting walls and shattered furniture. Every corner I turned, the shadow appeared, emerging from mist, vanishing, then reappearing closer each time. Its hollow eyes pierced through me, unblinking, as though it could see straight into my fear. The knocking continued, overlapping with whispers I could barely decipher. "You cannot leave. You are ours." Adrenaline gave me a desperate burst of energy. I lunged for a side door, slamming it open, but fog spilled in like liquid, seeping under the threshold. The shadow glided toward me effortlessly, limbs bending in unnatural ways, stretching impossibly as it advanced. My heart pounded in my ears. I understood one thing with horrifying clarity. Leaving this station alive would not be simple. The entity was patient, relentless, and the forest and the abandoned station were extensions of it. I stumbled through the side door, fog curling around my legs like icy tendrils. The forest outside was barely visible through the broken windows, but the mist thickened unnaturally, carrying that same metallic scent. I thought I had escaped the shadow, but then I felt it. A cold pressure brushed my shoulder, impossibly fast, almost intelligent. I spun around. The elongated figure was there, hovering just inches from me, limbs bending in ways that made my stomach churn. Its hollow black eyes bore into mine, unblinking, as if measuring my fear. My voice failed. I could barely breathe. Every instinct screamed to run, yet my legs felt rooted in place. The whispers returned, louder now, overlapping, echoing inside my mind. "You cannot leave. This place is ours." I darted toward a narrow path leading away from the station, branches slapping my face, mud sucking at my boots. The shadow moved effortlessly, gliding above the wet forest floor, following my every move, bending the fog and trees around it. For a brief moment, I thought about turning back, surrendering, but terror propelled me forward. The entity was patient, calculating, and I knew it was testing me. Testing how far fear could drive a human before it became prey. I had to keep running. Survival depended on it. I ran blindly into the dense forest, mud clinging to my boots, branches slapping my face, every nerve screaming danger. The fog thickened around me, curling through the trees like living tendrils. Behind me, the elongated shadow glided silently, its hollow eyes never leaving mine. Each step I took seemed to push me further into its domain, deeper into the forest that was no longer natural, but a maze designed to trap me. The whispers returned, urgent and overlapping, pressing against my mind. "You cannot leave. You are ours." My lungs burned, heart hammering as I tried to find a path out. The mist twisted, hiding the trail, reshaping the trees, making every direction feel the same. The shadow's presence was close now, almost tangible. A cold pressure that pressed against my chest and skull simultaneously. Branches snapped ahead, and I stumbled into a small clearing, hoping for a moment of clarity. Instead, the shadow appeared in the center, gliding with impossible grace, limbs stretching unnaturally, tilting its head as if studying me. I realized with terror that the forest wasn't just a setting. It was an extension of the entity. Survival meant more than running. It meant outsmarting something patient, relentless, and otherworldly. Panic surged as I stumbled over thick roots, mud caking my boots, rain dripping from my hair. Every step felt heavier, as if the forest itself resisted my escape. Then I saw it. The elongated shadow hovering ahead, limbs bending in impossible angles, gliding silently, yet with unnerving speed. Its hollow eyes fixed on me, unblinking and eternal. A sudden rustle behind me made my heart leap. One of my friends had fallen behind, and I could hear a strangled scream swallowed instantly by the fog. The shadow reached toward him, the air shimmering with cold pressure, and he vanished without a trace. I swallowed hard, chest tight with fear. The entity wasn't just stalking, it was calculating, choosing its prey, testing our terror. I bolted toward a faint light in the distance, branches slapping my face, mud sucking at my boots. The whispers grew louder, overlapping in a chorus that clawed at my mind. You cannot leave. We are always here. The forest had become a maze of terror, alive and relentless. The shadow was patient, waiting for the moment when I would falter, when fear would slow me enough for it to strike. Survival meant speed, but even speed might not be enough. The faint light ahead glimmered through the fog. A logging road, maybe a way out. Adrenaline surged, pushing me forward despite the exhaustion in my legs. The shadow hovered silently behind, gliding effortlessly over the muddy ground. Its limbs twisted in impossible directions, bending through space in ways that made my stomach churn. Branches whipped my face, roots grabbed at my boots, but I forced myself to keep moving. The whispers were deafening now, overlapping in a chaotic rhythm that felt like it was drilling into my skull. You cannot leave. This place is ours. The figure appeared ahead for a brief instant, tilting its head as though assessing me. Its presence pressed on me, suffocating, cold, and utterly alien. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet my mind reeled with disbelief. This wasn't just a creature. It was a force, a guardian of the abandoned station and the surrounding forest. I dared a glance back. The shadow hovered at the edge of the trees, patient, unyielding. The road was close. I could see a faint vehicle light approaching, a fragile hope. But I knew, deep down, this entity was not bound by the normal rules of distance or time. It waited, always watching, always patient. And I realized escape would not be simple, and survival might only be temporary. The road finally appeared clearer through the fog, and my heart raced with the hope of reaching it. Every muscle screamed to keep running, mud and rain forgotten as adrenaline carried me forward. The faint headlights of a passing truck offered a fragile promise of safety. But the shadow was still there. For a brief moment at the tree line, I saw it. Elongated limbs bending unnaturally, hollow black eyes fixed on me, moving with patient precision. The whispers clawed at my mind, soft yet insistent. You cannot leave. We are always here. I leapt onto the road just as the truck slowed, waving frantically. The driver's eyes widened in alarm, but relief flooded me as I climbed inside, soaked and shivering. Behind me, the forest remained shrouded in thick fog, silent once more. Yet I could feel the entity's gaze lingering, heavy and patient. The shadow had not followed onto the road, but its presence pressed into my mind. The abandoned ranger station, the forest, and the fog were extensions of it, and it had marked me. I had escaped, but only barely. The Washington rainforest was alive with its patience, and I knew it would wait, unyielding, for the next unwary traveler. I collapsed into the truck, drenched, shivering, every nerve screaming. Relief washed over me, but it was fragile. Even as we drove away, the fog behind the forest seemed alive, curling and shifting as though the shadow still watched, still waited. My friends who had survived were silent, eyes wide, hearts hammering, unable to speak the terror we had all witnessed. I thought about the ranger station, the shadow, the fog that had clung to everything. I've come to call it the fog sentinel. It wasn't just a creature, it was an extension of the abandoned station, of the rainforest itself. Patient, unyielding, and utterly alien, it observed. It toyed, it hunted. Even now, nights later, the memory returns. In foggy weather, I feel the pressure in my chest, the hollow gaze pressing from beyond the tree line. The forest had let me go, but only temporarily. Those who wander too far, too curious, might not be so fortunate. The Washington rainforest is not simply a wilderness. It is a domain of patience, of unseen watchers, of forces that wait for the next traveler to stumble into their fog-laden trap. I survived, but the fog sentinel endures. I had been planning this solo hike for weeks. Washington State's rainforests had always drawn me, thick, ancient, and filled with shadows that whispered even in daylight. That morning, rain drizzled steadily, fog curling around towering evergreens. The trailhead was nearly empty, save for a few distant hikers who disappeared behind the mist. I double-checked my gear, adjusted my backpack, and stepped onto the muddy path. The crunch of wet leaves beneath my boots breaking the eerie silence. The forest immediately enveloped me, damp air clinging to my skin, the smell of moss and decay intoxicating. Every step deeper into the wilderness heightened my awareness. Birds were silent, only the occasional drip of rain from foliage punctuating the stillness. I felt simultaneously exhilarated and uneasy. Hours passed, and the trail narrowed, winding along a moss-covered slope. I caught glimpses of movement in the fog, nothing human, yet unmistakably deliberate. Shadows twisted between the trees, vanishing whenever I tried to focus. My curiosity pushed me onward, but an uneasy sense of being watched began to settle over me. Then I saw it. Footprints in the mud, fresh but too large and uneven to be human. They led off the main path, deeper into the mist. As I descended into the ravine, the fog wrapped around me like a living thing, thick and suffocating. Every step made the forest seem denser, the trees leaning in as if watching. Then I saw it. A shadow among the mist, pale and elongated, limbs bending in impossible ways. My breath caught, and a cold sweat ran down my spine. It wasn't moving like a human. It glided, silent and deliberate, hovering above the wet forest floor. I froze. Its hollow black eyes locked on me, unblinking, yet I could feel its awareness pressing against my mind. A shiver ran down my body as whispers echoed from every direction. "You cannot leave. You are ours." My pulse raced, and I stumbled backward, tripping over roots and mud, the shadow following effortlessly, never losing focus. Branches whipped across my face as I scrambled to regain balance, the fog curling unnaturally around the figure. My rational mind tried to convince me it was a trick of the light, a hallucination caused by isolation and fatigue. But deep down, I knew better. This presence was real, intelligent, and patient, stalking me through the dense rainforest, waiting for me to falter. The forest had shifted from familiar wilderness into a living trap, and I realized that the hike I had planned for adventure had become a descent into something far more sinister. As I descended into the ravine, the fog wrapped around me like a living thing, thick and suffocating. Every step made the forest seem denser, the trees leaning in as if watching. Then I saw it, a shadow among the mist, pale and elongated, limbs bending in impossible ways. My breath caught, and a cold sweat ran down my spine. It wasn't moving like a human. It glided, silent and deliberate, hovering above the wet forest floor. I froze. Its hollow black eyes locked on me, unblinking, yet I could feel its awareness pressing against my mind. A shiver ran down my body as whispers echoed from every direction. "You cannot leave. You are ours." My pulse raced, and I stumbled backward, tripping over roots and mud, the shadow following effortlessly, never losing focus. Branches whipped across my face as I scrambled to regain balance, the fog curling unnaturally around the figure. My rational mind tried to convince me it was a trick of the light, a hallucination caused by isolation and fatigue. But deep down, I knew better. This presence was real, intelligent, and patient, stalking me through the dense rainforest, waiting for me to falter. The forest had shifted from familiar wilderness into a living trap, and I realized that the hike I had planned for adventure had become a descent into something far more sinister. Panic surged through me. I bolted down the ravine, mud and roots pulling at my boots, branches tearing at my clothes. The shadow followed effortlessly, gliding just above the forest floor, limbs twisting unnaturally, hollow eyes locked on me with terrifying focus. The whispers grew louder, a chorus that seemed to come from every direction at once. "You cannot leave. You are ours." I tried to rationalize, telling myself it was some trick of the fog, a hallucination born from isolation. But every instinct screamed the opposite. The air grew heavier, colder, pressing against my chest as if the forest itself had turned into a predator. My breath came in ragged gasps, lungs burning, but stopping was not an option. Ahead, the faint outline of the main trail appeared, a promise of safety. Yet the forest seemed to stretch, elongating the path, making the light feel further away. The shadow moved with impossible speed, cutting off angles, herding me toward deeper fog, testing my resolve. Branches whipped my face, and the whispers intensified, repeating in maddening patterns, pressing against my mind. The rainforest was alive, patient, and relentless. Escape would require more than speed. It would require cunning, nerve, and a bit of luck that I didn't know I had. I stumbled onto the main trail, gasping for breath, my legs shaking from exhaustion. The fog still hung thick, curling around the trees, but for a moment, I felt a fragile sense of relief. Maybe I had escaped. Then I sensed it. The cold pressure, impossibly fast, brushing against my shoulder. I spun around. The shadow was there, hovering just inches away, limbs bending in ways that made my stomach churn. Hollow black eyes stared into mine, unblinking, studying my fear. I froze, heart hammering, unable to move. The whispers echoed inside my skull. "You cannot leave. This forest is ours." Branches cracked ahead, and a fleeting glimpse of movement revealed the forest itself responding to it. Trees leaning, fog thickening, roots shifting as if to trap me. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs refused. Then, summoning every ounce of courage, I bolted, veering off the trail into denser undergrowth. The shadow followed effortlessly, gliding above the forest floor. I realized with chilling clarity that I was not merely being chased. I was being hunted, herded, tested. The Washington rainforest was alive with patience and malice, and the entity was its relentless guardian. My survival depended on speed, cunning, and the hope that the fog might momentarily hide me. I plunged deeper into the forest, hoping to lose the shadow in the thick fog. But the rainforest itself seemed to resist me. Branches bent unnaturally, roots rose like fingers, and the mist twisted in ways that obscured the path. Every step forward felt like wading through a living trap, each movement anticipated by the entity pursuing me. The shadow hovered behind, silent and deliberate. Its limbs bent in impossible ways, gliding over roots and mud without effort. Hollow eyes bore into mine, unblinking, as if it could read my terror and measure my fear. The whispers returned, louder now, wrapping around me like tendrils. You cannot leave. You belong to the forest. I tripped over a gnarled root, falling hard to the muddy ground. Pain shot through my shoulder, and the shadow glided closer, its presence pressing against my chest. I scrambled to my feet, every nerve screaming, and darted toward a faint glimmer of light that pierced the fog ahead. The logging road I had glimpsed earlier. The forest around me shifted subtly, shadows stretching and twisting unnaturally, guiding the entity closer. I realized with bone-deep dread that this was no ordinary pursuit. The rainforest was alive, patient, and merciless, and the shadow was the embodiment of its hunting will. Escape would demand more than speed. It would demand cunning and luck. Exhaustion weighed heavily on me, but there was no time to slow down. The shadow was relentless, gliding silently above the forest floor, limbs bending in ways that defied logic. Its hollow black eyes were fixed on me, unblinking, a predator measuring its prey. The whispers wrapped around my mind, overlapping, insistent. You cannot leave. You are ours. Branches tore at my face and arms as I sprinted through the dense undergrowth. Every step felt like a battle against both the forest and the entity itself. I stumbled over roots and mud, scraping my knees, but the shadow never faltered. It moved with impossible precision, guiding me deeper into the rainforest's trap. Ahead, I glimpsed a faint opening, the logging road I had seen from the ravine. Hope surged, but it was fragile. The fog thickened unnaturally, curling around the trees, disorienting me. The shadow glided closer, almost tangible now, its cold pressure brushing against my back. Fear clawed at my mind, but a stubborn thread of determination kept me moving. Survival wasn't guaranteed. Every instinct told me that one mistake could mean becoming part of the forest's growing collection of lost souls. I pushed forward, knowing that the entity was patient, calculating, and the next moment could seal my fate. The logging road finally appeared through the dense fog, faint light glimmering ahead. Adrenaline surged as I sprinted toward it, ignoring the burning in my lungs and the mud clinging to my boots. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to hope that I might finally escape. But the shadow was relentless. It glided silently over the forest floor, limbs bending in impossible angles, cutting off any potential escape paths. Hollow black eyes bore into mine, measuring my terror with unyielding precision. The whispers echoed all around. You cannot leave. This forest is ours. Branches whipped across my face, roots clawed at my boots, and the fog thickened, curling like fingers toward me. The entity moved with a supernatural grace, stalking me patiently, predicting my every move. I darted between trees, seeking cover, but the forest itself seemed alive, subtly shifting, guiding the shadow closer. A flash of headlights from an approaching vehicle offered the only chance of survival. Heart hammering, I leapt onto the road, mud spraying, gasping for air. Behind me, the shadow paused at the edge of the tree line, tilting its head as though waiting, patient, unyielding. It hadn't left. It never truly does. The forest had marked me, and its guardian would remain, waiting for the next traveler. I collapsed onto the edge of the road, panting, mud-covered, every nerve trembling. The faint headlights of a passing truck were my only lifeline. I waved frantically, and the driver slowed, eyes widening at the sight of me. Relief flooded me, but it was fragile, like the thin mist curling around the forest. I dared a glance back. The shadow lingered at the tree line, motionless yet utterly present. Hollow black eyes fixed on me, patient, unyielding. I realized then that it hadn't pursued me onto the road, but its presence pressed against my mind, heavy and insistent. The whispers had faded, replaced by a suffocating silence. But I could feel the entity watching, waiting. My friends who had survived the day's hike were pale and silent, their expressions mirroring my own terror. We drove away, but the forest seemed to stretch infinitely behind us, alive with unseen watchers. The logging road, the ravine, and the dense rainforest were no longer just wilderness. They were a domain, and the shadow was its guardian. I had escaped, but only barely. The Washington rainforest had marked me, and the fog sentinel, the entity stalking the lost, would remain, waiting for the next traveler brave or foolish enough to wander too far. Even after we drove miles away from the forest, the terror did not leave me. Nights later, I still felt the cold presence pressing against my mind. The fog sentinel, as I've come to call it, was patient, unyielding, and entirely aware. The Washington rainforest had not let me go. It had marked me, and I could feel its gaze lingering in every shadow, every curl of mist outside my window. I have returned to civilization, but the memory of the forest, of the fog, of those impossible limbs and hollow eyes, is inescapable. The entity is not just a predator. It is a force of the rainforest itself. It waits for those who dare to wander too deep, teaching a lesson in patience, terror, and the fragile boundary between life and disappearance. Even now, when fog drifts over my backyard or I hear distant whispers in the wind, I remember the forest's claim. I survived the chase, but the fog sentinel endures, and it is waiting, always. The Washington rainforest is no longer just wilderness in my mind. It is a realm of relentless watchfulness, and I am a marked witness to its unseen horrors. The forest claimed a piece of me that day, and I fear that one day it will claim more. I had been looking forward to this weekend for months, a solo camping trip deep in the Washington rainforest. Far from cell service, far from civilization. The rain was steady as I drove, a gray curtain over the forest, and by the time I arrived at the trailhead, fog had begun to settle thickly among the towering evergreens. The forest smelled damp, earthy, and old, the kind of place where shadows seem to watch. Carrying my backpack and tent, I hiked along a muddy trail, crunching over wet leaves and broken twigs. Every sound felt amplified. A branch snapping in the distance, the rush of a small stream, the whisper of wind through the ferns. I found a small clearing beside a stagnant pond, perfect for setting up camp. I pitched my tent, stacked firewood, and tried to shake off the unease settling over me. As night fell, the fog thickened, curling around the trees like living tendrils. The forest grew unnaturally silent. Even nocturnal animals seemed absent. Then faintly at first, I heard it. Whispers, soft, unintelligible, yet undeniably human, drifting through the mist. I froze, heart pounding, certain I was alone. But the whispers continued, circling my campsite, growing louder, more insistent, as though the forest itself were speaking to me. As I sat by the small campfire, trying to convince myself the whispers were just the wind, they grew louder, closer, almost surrounding me. Every instinct screamed that I was not alone. The fog shifted unnaturally, curling around the trees like ghostly fingers, and the faint shapes of shadows seemed to dance at the edges of my vision. I strained my ears, trying to discern words from the whispers, but they were garbled, overlapping in a way that made my skin crawl. You shouldn't be here. You cannot leave. I thought I heard fragments, though I couldn't be sure if my mind was playing tricks. My heart pounded so loudly, I feared it would give away my position. I grabbed my flashlight, sweeping it across the clearing. The beam cut through the thick mist, illuminating nothing but gnarled trees, wet moss, and fallen branches. Then I saw it. A pale, elongated shadow, gliding silently among the trees. Limbs bent at unnatural angles, hovering just above the forest floor, eyes hollow and unblinking, fixed on me. Panic surged, yet curiosity forced me to observe. The shadow moved with a deliberate patience, circling the clearing, as if testing me, studying my fear. The whispers now pressed into my mind, insistent and maddening, leaving no doubt I was being hunted. I clutched my flashlight tightly, hands trembling as I scanned the fog-shrouded clearing. The shadow moved silently, its elongated limbs bending in ways that made my stomach twist. It was patient, deliberate, and impossibly still when it paused to stare at me. Hollow black eyes seemed to peer straight into my mind, and the whispers intensified, circling in maddening patterns. You cannot leave. You are ours. I stumbled backward, tripping over a root, and the shadow glided closer without a sound. The air grew unnaturally cold, pressing against my chest as if the forest itself were alive and breathing. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the fog distorted distances, and the familiar trail to my car seemed impossibly far. Branches whipped across my face and arms as I scrambled to stand. My flashlight flickered, casting brief, jerky shadows across the trees. I caught glimpses of movement in every direction. The shadow wasn't alone. Shapes twisted in the mist, humanoid yet unnatural, circling silently, herding me toward the center of the clearing. I realized with bone-deep dread that the forest wasn't just alive, it was hunting. The whispers had become a chorus of intent, and the shadows were patient predators waiting for me to falter. Survival demanded speed, cunning, and a little luck I wasn't sure I had. Fear surged through me like electricity as I bolted from the clearing, mud squelching beneath my boots. The shadows moved with impossible grace, gliding silently over roots and fallen branches, keeping perfect pace. Their hollow black eyes followed every twitch of my body, every glance over my shoulder. The whispers now pressed into my mind like claws. You cannot leave. The forest claims all. The fog thickened unnaturally, curling and twisting like living tendrils. The trees seemed to lean toward me, closing off paths I had thought open. I realized the forest itself was aiding the shadows, reshaping the terrain to trap me. Branches clawed at my face, roots snagged my feet, and the damp moss seemed to cling to my clothing as if trying to hold me in place. I stumbled into a small ravine, heart hammering, and glanced up. The shadow hovered at the edge, limbs bending in impossible angles, waiting patiently. I could feel its presence pressing against my chest, cold and suffocating. Panic screamed at me to keep moving, but my body was failing. Each step was a battle, each breath a struggle. The rainforest was alive, relentless, patient. The shadows were not just following me, they were guiding me, herding me towards something I could not yet see. And I knew that one mistake could be my last. I skidded to a halt at the edge of a small clearing, mud caking my boots, lungs burning. The shadows hovered at the tree line, elongated limbs bending in impossible angles, their hollow eyes fixed on me. The whispers had grown deafening, circling my mind with one relentless message. You cannot leave. You belong to the forest. Desperation overtook fear, and I darted toward the only path I could see, weaving between twisted, moss-covered trees. Roots clawed at my feet, branches tore at my clothes, but the shadow moved effortlessly, gliding silently over every obstacle. Each heartbeat echoed in my chest as I realized how patient it was, how it anticipated my every move. I stumbled over a fallen log and hit the wet ground hard. The shadow paused above me, just long enough to make my skin crawl with its intent stare, then slowly followed as I scrambled to my feet. My rational mind tried to convince me it was hallucination, exhaustion, or fog-induced paranoia. But deep down, I knew otherwise. The forest had claimed a piece of my sanity. I was being hunted, and the entity was patient, calculating, and merciless. Escape depended on more than speed. It demanded cunning, courage, and a sliver of luck I wasn't certain I possessed. I plunged deeper into the forest, seeking a route out. But the landscape had changed. The familiar trail had vanished, replaced by gnarled roots and twisted trees that seemed to shift subtly as I ran. Thick fog clung to everything, curling like fingers, disorienting me with every step. It was as if the rainforest itself had become alive, working with the shadow to trap me. The entity glided silently behind me, limbs bending in unnatural angles, eyes hollow and unblinking. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I felt the forest pressing in, narrowing my options, guiding me into corners where escape seemed impossible. Whispers surrounded me now, not just from the trees, but from the mist itself. You cannot leave. You are ours. I tripped over a massive root, scraping my hands and knees on the wet moss, pain lancing through me. The shadow hovered above, just out of reach, patient and deliberate, watching as I struggled to rise. Panic clawed at my chest, but I forced myself up, sprinting toward a faint glimmer of light in the fog. A logging road, my last hope of escape. The forest was no longer just a backdrop. It was alive, predatory, and every step forward was a battle against both the supernatural entity and the very terrain itself. Exhaustion clawed at me, but the shadow never faltered. It glided silently above the forest floor, its elongated limbs bending in ways that made my stomach churn. Hollow black eyes bore into mine, measuring my fear, patient and relentless. The whispers had become a constant presence, circling my mind with maddening insistence. You cannot leave. You belong to the forest. Branches whipped my face, roots snagged my boots, and the thick fog distorted the trail ahead. I glimpsed a faint opening, the logging road I had seen earlier, and surged toward it, lungs burning, heart hammering. But the forest itself seemed to conspire against me. Twisted trees bent to obscure my path, moss clung to my feet, and shadows twisted unnaturally in every direction. I stumbled into a shallow ravine, slipping on wet rocks. The shadow paused at the edge, tilting its head, observing me with calculated patience. It had all the time in the world. I realized with chilling clarity that it wasn't merely chasing me. It was herding me, testing my resolve, guiding me toward an unknown fate. Every instinct screamed that one mistake could cost me everything. The forest was alive, and its guardian was unstoppable. Survival depended on speed, cunning, and an ounce of luck I wasn't sure I possessed. The logging road appeared through the fog, a fragile promise of escape. My legs burned, lungs screaming for air, but I forced myself to keep running. For a brief moment, hope surged, and I dared to imagine that I might survive. Then I saw it. The shadow gliding effortlessly behind me, limbs bending in impossible angles, hollow black eyes fixed on me with unwavering focus. The whispers crescendoed into a maddening chorus. "You cannot leave. The forest claims all." Branches clawed at my face, roots snagged my feet, and the fog thickened, curling around me like icy fingers. I leapt onto the logging road just as the headlights of a passing truck cut through the mist. Relief and terror collided. The shadow paused at the tree line, patient and deliberate, almost taunting me. I didn't stop running until the headlights disappeared over the next bend. The forest loomed behind me, silent again, but I knew it wasn't gone. Its guardian had been waiting, and it would continue to wait for the next wanderer, foolish enough to venture too deep. Even as I sat in the safety of the truck, soaked and shivering, the whispers lingered in my mind. The Washington rainforest had claimed a piece of me that night, and the fog sentinel, as I now call it, had marked me forever. I collapsed onto the side of the logging road, gasping for air, every muscle trembling. The truck's headlights faded, leaving only the soft glow of my flashlight. Relief surged, but it was fragile. The forest still pressed in, alive with shadows and whispers. The fog sentinel hadn't left. It lingered at the tree line, patient and unmoving, hollow eyes fixed on me as if waiting. Even the silence was oppressive. The fog twisted unnaturally, curling around the trees, and I could feel the forest's gaze in every shadow. My mind raced with disbelief and terror, realizing that what I had encountered was no hallucination. The rainforest had a guardian, patient and unrelenting, and I had survived only because I had been fast, alert, and lucky. I dared not look back for long as I hobbled toward civilization. Every instinct told me that if I slowed, the entity would claim me. The whispers had faded, replaced by a heavy, suffocating presence. Though I was physically safe, I could feel the weight of the forest's claim on my mind. The fog sentinel was waiting, always watching, a silent reminder that the rainforest had the last word. Even now, whenever fog drifts through the trees or whispers echo faintly in the wind, I remember. The forest never truly lets go. Even after I reached the edge of the forest and returned to civilization, the terror did not leave me. Nights later, I would wake in a cold sweat, heart pounding, haunted by the hollow eyes of the fog sentinel. Its presence had been patient, unyielding, and utterly aware. The Washington rainforest had marked me, and I could feel its gaze lingering in every shadow, in every curling mist. I have tried to rationalize it, telling myself the whispers, the shadows, the impossible limbs were products of exhaustion or isolation. But the memories are too vivid, too precise. The fog, the twisted trees, and the predatory patience of the entity are burned into my mind. The forest was alive that night, and the fog sentinel was its guardian, watching, testing, waiting for the next wanderer to wander too far. Even now, when fog drifts over my backyard or I hear distant rustling in the trees, I feel the forest's claim. I survived, but only barely. A part of me remains in the rainforest, where the shadows wait, patient and eternal. The fog sentinel endures, and I fear that one day it will claim more than just memories. The Washington rainforest is no longer just wilderness in my mind. It is a realm of relentless watchfulness, and I am a marked witness. As the mist curls over the Washington rainforest, we are reminded that some places are more than wilderness. They are realms of ancient, patient terror. The stories you've just heard are not myths. They are accounts from those who dared to venture too far and lived to tell the tale. Barely. The fog sentinel and the shadows of the forest are not gone. They linger in the fog, in the rustling of leaves, in the silent spaces between the trees, waiting patiently for the next traveler to stumble into their domain. The rainforest watches, it remembers, and it never truly lets go. So, before you plan your next hike or camping trip, remember this. The forest may seem quiet, but it is alive in ways you cannot imagine. Some whispers are meant to be heeded, and some shadows are meant to be avoided. Stay alert, stay aware, and maybe, just maybe, stay away. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and comment below where you're watching from and what time it is. The forest may be closer than you think.